They say she rode into Silverhorn Pass, with a white veil fluttering behind her, laughter still on her lips, and never came out again. For a year, the canyon winds whispered her name, but none dared follow it into the jagged maw where the sun vanished early and screams vanished quicker. Folks in Larkspur Hollow still speak of that day, when joy turned to dust before sundown. Claire Whitlock had always been more than the rancher's daughter. She had eyes like open sky and a spirit that outran the horses she broke bareback. She read books by lantern light and shot cleaner than her brothers. There was a softness to her, too, something she gave to the land, to the townsfolk, to the stray dogs that trailed her home. But love, it seemed, softened her most. She found it in a quiet cattle trader named James Harrow, a man who spoke slow and rode straight, and looked at her like she'd roped the moon itself. They married beneath the cottonwood tree behind the Whitlock homestead, with wildflowers in her hair and dust on her boots. The preacher's voice quivered more than theirs. Folks said it was the kind of wedding you only see once, the kind that stills the wind. After the vows and the pie and the fiddling died down, Claire and James mounted up and rode toward the valley past Silverhorn Pass, a simple honeymoon ride, just for the night. By dusk, only Claire's horse came back. The mare was streaked with sweat, saddle twisted, a smear of blood along her haunches. No sign of James, no sign of Claire, just that horse, trembling in the twilight like it had seen death and outrun it. Samuel Whitlock, a man built like the land he tamed, thick with years and storms, mounted up without a word. He and 6 others rode through the pass, by lantern light, calling her name until dawn broke against the canyon walls. They found nothing. No boot prints, no bodies, not even a shred of veil, just stone and silence. Grief, they say, makes men into ghosts. Samuel didn't ride much after that. He sat on the porch and drank with the same steady hand that once raised barns. He spoke Claire's name only once more, the night he fired his ranch hands and let the cattle go. "What's the use?" he muttered. "She ain't coming back." The town held its breath for a week, then a month, then a year. Folks offered explanations like prayers. Some blamed Comanche stragglers, though they hadn't been seen near the pass in seasons. Others whispered of mountain lions or bandits, even witchcraft. Old wives muttered about spirits in the cliffs. The sheriff shrugged through it all, too fond of his own comfort to press danger where it might stare back. When James Harrow's saddlebag was found abandoned at the canyon's edge days later, the mystery thickened. Then James disappeared, too. Some said he ran off. Others said he was taken. Claire's disappearance settled over Larkspur Hollow like a second sunset, colder than the first. The Whitlock ranch grew wild, fences sagging, windows boarded. No one dared claim it. Every now and then, a drifter would ask about the bride in the canyon. They'd hear the story, shake their heads, and ride on quicker than they came. But some things don't die easy in the West. They wait, like rust on a rifle, like a storm building beyond the ridge. The land remembered Claire Whitlock. So did the wind. And if you stood just right near the pass as the sun fell behind the stones, you could swear you heard a voice on the breeze, not crying, not calling, but promising. The promise of return. A year passed like a long drought, quiet, heavy, and full of things folks didn't say aloud. In Larkspur Hollow, the tale of Claire Whitlock faded from daily talk, but not from the corners of minds. The pass remained untouched, a wound in the land no one dared probe. Dust gathered on porch railings. The town seemed smaller without her spirit threading through it. The Whitlock ranch stood hollow, grass growing knee-high where cattle once roamed. Samuel Whitlock hadn't been seen in months. Some said he was gone, others that he simply stopped being a man and became part of the land, sitting, breathing, waiting. Then came the wind. It howled through Silverhorn like it remembered something the rest of the world forgot. On the exact day she vanished, a storm rose up, unnatural and thick, spitting sand into every crack and corner of Larkspur Hollow. The sky turned bronze. Horses bucked in their stalls, and doors slammed even when latched. It wasn't just a storm. It felt like something arriving. And then she came. Out of that swirling grit rode a figure no one had dared imagine, Claire Whitlock. Not the same girl in lace and laughter, but a woman made of leather and silence. She sat atop a soot-colored mare, shoulders squared like a soldier. Dust cloaked her like a second skin. Her hat was drawn low, veil long gone. The town froze. Behind her, tethered to her saddle by a length of rope, rode a second figure, a man, slumped and bound, his hands tied before him and his mouth quiet as death. No one recognized him. His eyes held something feral, but his body bore the shape of surrender. He didn't resist. He just followed. Claire stopped in front of the sheriff's office. Sheriff Byers, a portly man with shaky hands and eyes trained to avoid trouble, stepped out slowly, uncertain whether he was facing a ghost or legend. Claire dismounted with the grace of a woman who hadn't forgotten how to fight. She dropped the rope at the sheriff's boots. "This one's called Briar," she said. Her voice was dry but carried like a rifle crack. "He's canyon vultures. One of them. There are more." The townsfolk stood back, mouths parted, unsure whether to cheer or flee. Briar looked up once, eyes scanning the faces as if memorizing them. Then he lowered his head again. Sheriff Byers cleared his throat. "Canyon vultures," he repeated. "Thought they stuck to the Badlands." "They didn't," Claire replied. "They came through the pass. Took me. Took others. He helped." The sheriff blinked. "Helped. Took part. Then turned quiet. That don't buy him forgiveness." She met the sheriff's eyes. "But he's worth more alive." With that, she turned, climbed back onto her horse, and rode out without another word. The sheriff watched her disappear into the dust, like she'd never returned at all. Then he turned to Briar, who hadn't moved. "Well, hell," he muttered, rubbing the sweat from his brow. "Let's get you behind bars before someone tries to hang you." Briar didn't flinch. He just walked where they told him. The town lit with questions that night, but no answers came. Claire was gone before dawn. No one saw her sleep, eat, or speak again. Just that rope, that outlaw, and that look in her eyes, like she'd seen the worst hell had to offer and carved her way out of it with her bare hands. Word spread beyond Larkspur Hollow. Folks from neighboring towns rode in just to see where it happened, to talk to anyone who had been there. Some asked if it was really her. Others swore she was dead, and this was some wandering spirit, settling scores before returning to the grave. A boy named Ellis, no more than 10, swore he saw her crying by the old church before she vanished again. His ma slapped the tail out of his mouth before it could grow legs. But the story spread anyway. The Whitlock ranch stayed empty, though a new trail of boot prints appeared by the barn. A canteen was found hanging from the post. The mare had been watered. In town, Sheriff Byers kept Briar locked tight. Folks demanded answers. Who were the canyon vultures? How many were there? Why now? But Briar said nothing. Not a word. Not even when Reverend Cole read him scripture. Not when Doc Harlan pulled the bullet from his shoulder Claire had planted before dragging him in. He only watched the door, as though waiting for her to return. Some said he was mute. Others said fear had cut his tongue. Still, the silence pressed. And through that hush, the town began to feel the stirrings of something not felt in years: vengeance. Not law. Not justice. Something older. Grittier. Claire Whitlock was alive. And she hadn't come back for closure. She'd come back for war. The trail began in blood. South of Silverhorn, the land dips into dry gulches and sunburned flats, where only scorpions and desperados thrive. There, weeks after Claire Whitlock's return, the first carcass was found. Gavin Telt, a known smuggler with ties to the canyon vultures. His horse returned without him, reins slick with dried crimson, saddlebags untouched. They found what was left of him hanging from a cottonwood tree, a strip of lace tied to his boot. The sheriff received no note, just silence and a name. By the time the second body turned up, Hollis Creek, a knife thief and bootlegger, the pattern had set in. Each corpse bore no bullet to the back or coward's death. They'd been looked in the eye, faced something they never expected, a bride in dust-stained leather and cold blue eyes that didn't blink. Claire rode alone. Always alone, but some said they'd seen a shadow following her, a man in black with no name, a quiet outlaw tethered to her cause, not by rope now, but by something worse: guilt. Briar. No one knew why she spared him. Maybe he had turned on his own. Maybe he'd seen something none of the others did. Seen Claire survive what should have broken her. Watched her crawl from whatever grave they'd buried her in and come back harder than bone. Whatever the reason, Briar followed. Always a few paces back. Never spoke. Never drew steel unless she ordered. Together, they moved like a ghost story. Campfires were found still warm, with bootprints trailing into nowhere. Maps were redrawn. Lawmen from far-off towns came with questions and left with prayers. The vultures, once just a whispered gang in the Badlands, now had names and faces. Claire was giving them both. One by one, she hunted them. Sometimes she'd ride into a saloon and lay a name on the counter. If no one answered, she'd wait. Just sit at the back, sipping water, eye scanning every throat and hand. Sooner or later, someone would bolt. She never ran after them. She let Briar do the chasing. They said he never touched his gun, just rope and fists and a knife as worn as his conscience. Those caught weren't brought to town. They disappeared. No trials. No speeches. Just the wind and the rising count of the dead. Sheriff Byers tried to send riders after her. They returned pale, shaken. One lost his nerve completely and moved east, saying there were things in the past no badge could fix. Reverend Cole called for peace from the pulpit, saying vengeance was the devil's work. But even he didn't ride after her. Not anymore. Only one man dared. Samuel Whitlock. Word reached him of what his daughter was doing. He rose from his silent porch one gray morning and saddled a horse that hadn't been touched in a year. No one saw him leave. No one needed to. When a Whitlock rode with purpose, the ground remembered. He found her 3 days later beneath the ruins of an old way station, her back to a dead fire, cleaning her rifle with the care of a surgeon. Briar sat nearby, chewing jerky, eyes low. Samuel dismounted without a word. Claire looked up, pausing only briefly. "You come to stop me?" she asked. "No," he said. "Came to ride with you." She studied him a moment longer, then nodded. From that point forward, the hunt grew sharper, faster. The last of the vultures, 4 men and a woman named Jessup, holed up in the Devil's Bow, a narrow crescent canyon riddled with caves and false paths. Perfect for vanishing. Perfect for cowards. Claire didn't wait for daylight. Under the cover of stars, she moved like a storm ready to split the earth. Samuel flanked left. Briar climbed the canyon edge, a long rope coiled around his chest. They hit fast. The first outlaw dropped before he could stand. The second fired wild into shadows and screamed Claire's name like it might shield him. It didn't. Gunfire echoed off the walls. The wind howled through, bearing witness to old debts finally paid. When the smoke cleared, 3 lay dead. 1 crawled until Claire ended it clean. Only Jessup remained, sharp-eyed and cruel, with a scar down her chin and a Winchester in hand. She held the high ground, crouched in the rocks, breathing hard. "I should have shot you dead that night," she spat. Claire stepped forward. "You did try. Then you ran." Jessup cocked her rifle. "I ain't running now." "You should." The shot came fast. Claire dropped behind a boulder. Briar moved wide, looping left. Samuel circled low. It ended with a scream. Not Jessup's, Briar's. He took a bullet to the leg, pulling Claire clear of an ambush. She finished it. 1 shot. Center mass. Jessup died with surprise on her face. Silence followed. They tended to Briar, bound his leg, and watched the sunrise stain the canyon red. Samuel looked at the bodies, then at Claire. "It's done," he said. Claire didn't answer. Her eyes were on the horizon, where the wind never stopped whispering. Something still waited. They say the wind never spoke again the way it did that year. Not with the same fire, not with the same sorrow. It wandered Larkspur Hollow like a ghost that had finished its tale and now only hummed the chorus. Folks spoke soft of the woman who came back different, of Claire Whitlock, the bride who vanished on her wedding day and returned carved from vengeance and grit. After the blood dried in Devil's Bow, after Jessup's last breath, Claire didn't come back to town for celebration. There was no parade, no speech. She rode in silent, passing the outskirts of Larkspur Hollow as dawn cracked wide open, her head drawn low, her horse marked by the long trail behind him. Briar limped behind her, face tight with pain but eyes clearer than before. Something in him had shifted, Not quite redemption, but a shadow of it. Samuel rode last, weathered and silent, watching his daughter with pride cut deep by pain. They didn't speak much. What needed saying had already been said with fire and iron. Sheriff Byers waited on the steps of the jailhouse when they returned. His badge hung crooked, and his eyes carried the weariness of a man who'd seen justice done in ways the law would never understand. "She's gone then?" he asked. Claire nodded. "Good," he said. "And the rest?" "Enough of them met the dirt. The rest won't crawl far." Byers scratched his jaw. "Folk'll talk about this for years." Claire gave him a look so steady he faltered. "Let him talk." She didn't dismount, didn't go inside, didn't collect anything from the ranch that once bore her name. Instead, she looked down Main Street, where curtains trembled and faces hid behind shutters. No one dared come greet her, and she didn't expect them to. Claire Whitlock had become something more than a woman in a dress. She had become the weight of what vengeance costs. "Where'll you go now?" Byers asked. She didn't answer, just turned her horse and rode toward the pass. Samuel tipped his hat to the sheriff, then followed. Briar, wincing, climbed into his saddle and brought up the rear, his leg bound, his eyes set forward. They vanished into the very place she'd once been taken, where death had tried to bury her and failed. Time passed. The town healed, but never quite filled the shape of her story. Children asked their mothers about the bride, who came back with a noose in one hand and fire in her heart. Mothers said hush. Fathers spoke low in saloons, repeating tales with hands shaking slightly around their glasses. They said she was justice, said she was death's regret, said she still roamed the frontier, hunting what the law left behind. Sometimes the story said she wore white again. Other times, black as night, always on horseback, always with silence trailing behind her. In Red Hollow, a gang disappeared after robbing a stagecoach. In Whisper Bend, a widow woke to find a wanted man tied to her porch post with a note. He confessed. Towns learned to listen when the wind changed. No one ever knew where she laid her head. Only one man seemed to know more than he told, an older cowboy with a limp and a quiet mouth who passed through now and again. He never gave a name, but he left coin in every church box and bought bread for orphans without waiting for thanks. And every few years, a stranger would ride into Larkspur Hollow, ask about the woman in the pass. The sheriff, older now, would nod toward the mountains and say only, "She went where the world couldn't reach her." As for Samuel Whitlock, his grave appeared one spring near the edge of a bluff overlooking the pass. No one saw who carved the stone or dug the earth. The headstone bore no name, only a carving of a wild mare and the words, "He stood beside her." What Claire became in the end, vengeful spirit, outlaw, guardian, no one truly knows. Maybe she rode until her war was spent. Maybe she found peace in the silence she once feared. Or maybe she still watches the hills, waiting for evil to stir again. But in the quiet hours, when dusk stretches long and the coyotes go still, some say you can hear hooves in the wind. Not fast, not hurried, just steady, just watching. And if you listen close enough, if the night is just right, you might hear a second step behind her. One step behind, always.